And that requires ring fencing of our cities in a very, very legalistically, very strong, effective manner. I mean, the point made by Mr. Haldia is very critical. Land monetization goes the key to rapid urbanization. Otherwise resource will just not be possible. The third point I want to make is that if you deal with urban planners in states and in cities, which I have done, cutting across states, urban planners are still frozen in the American mindset of sprawling cities. They become regulators. The concept of compact, dense, vertical cities hasn't crept in. And unless the mindset of urban planners changes at the grassroots level in city, you go to DDA urban planners, they still believe in sprawling cities. So I think that mindset needs to be broken. So 3 points: technology, land monetization, and changing the mindset of urban planners.
Yeah, I would just encourage everyone here to make, if they have some views on sprawl versus vertical, because this is an important issue that keeps coming up. Bimal, I've noticed, I think there are 2 people here, and after that I'll come to you, please. And please introduce yourself.
I'm Anand Singh, Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Urban Development. Regarding that point made by Mr. Elaine on regulation, that you cannot regulate out of poverty, that's a very good point, sir. And in our work in the ministry, we always get this thing, not necessarily in the urban sphere, but also in the national sphere. Where does the market end in India? Where does planning start? Where does regulation come in? Where do contracts come in? So especially in the realm of urban infrastructure, this boundaries, how do they blur between markets, planning, regulation, and contracts? Much more work needs to be done on that. So, ma'am, some more research agenda for you on that. Thank you.
Thank you, please.
Thank you. I'm Manoj Singh. I'm Advisor Transport in the Planning Commission. My question is to Elaine, and this is regarding and I think this theme of the new proletariat being the person who has to commute 3 hours each way every day, I think it resonates very well with us. But I'm slightly intrigued by the point that you made towards the end that this issue of the integration of metro. How do we sort of access the metro in a city like Delhi? And I remember Sridharan, in one of the interviews, he said that the only thing he regretted about Delhi Metro was not integrating it with the bus service. But I wonder that whether even a bus service is possible and feasible, because I have, from my own experience, I have 2 metro stations which I access. One is around 700 meters or 800 meters. The other is 3 kilometers. The 3 kilometers I can go by an auto. But the 700-800 meters I have to access through a slum, a part slum, and under the bypass and so on. So the foot is the best. So when you say that the metro stations should be 10 kilometers apart, is it that you're trying to say that the pedestrian access to metro is not a feasible thing? Or are you trying to make a point that, I mean, we should have some kind of a network which sort of brings people from far apart, and here the distances could be further apart, but when we try to come closer to the CBD, they should be closer to each other. The stations should be closer to each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Bimal?
Okay, I wanted to say something when he said something about American planners. I'm a practicing urban planner from Ahmedabad, and yes, you are right. There's a big difference between the way American planners think. I think there's a big difference between the American planners think and Indian ones. And I studied all my planning in the US, and just I think to reinforce what Alain said. When we studied planning theory, the first question was, when is planning justified? So you had to say markets work well, where markets don't work, then government intervention is where you will step in. That's where you're justified in stepping in. When I came back to India and started practicing planning, I realized that the license Raj is well and alive in the local level and state level, regulating everything Here, in fact, even in the planning schools, I would say, the question is not when is planning justified, but exactly the opposite, when are markets justified. Everything should be planned. I'll do the transport, I'll even manage the inclusion, I'll manage this. It's a paternalistic approach, wanting to do everything. I think the only point when planning will start working is when it will recognize that you step in when markets fail, really, or so the balance sort of tips. The second thing I'd just like to say very quickly is that we have this big idea that planning should be technocratic, and it still remains everywhere. We want to fix everything. We want to fix the FSI. We want to design everything, as Alan said. That's the real problem, and we do not want to let politics into planning. Okay? If planning remains apolitical and technocratic, it's not going to work. And if our cities are not open to political pressure, it's not going to work. So one of the key problems I see in my work in cities is that the cities are creatures of state government run by IAS officers, most of the large ones. They're not run by politicians. They're not open to pressure from the people who live there. These are the two key problems in planning. One is, how do you let markets do what they have to do? And second, how do you open it up more to politics?
Yes, please.
I am Debulina from National Institute of Urban Affairs. I had a small observation with the census 2011 data. We have had an increase of 4% in the level of urbanization, and I was just working with the figures where I found about 25 to 30% of the increases because of the growth of census towns. In the last decade, over 2,500 new census towns have been added. And as of now, these settlements are under rural governance. So as and when they start coming in the urban, becoming urban centers, who would take care of the basic amenities like water supply, infrastructure and all? Shouldn't we start planning for this right now, or do we wait till new slums come up? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I'm Sanjeev Kumar Lohia, former OSD Urban Transport from Ministry of Urban Development. One issue which was just mentioned, planning and the market forces. I think there has to be a balance between the two, because Gurgaon is a city which has been left to the market forces. The planning of infrastructure for a city, because unless until that is done, whatever one of our colleagues mentioned, that you put a public transport, you will find that it is full. But in Gurgaon, to reach that public transport from a distance which aerial distance might be 180 meters, but you have to travel 1.8 kilometers just to reach that, just because the planning of various parameters which should go into the town planning have not been done. The market forces, yes, some of the aspects have to be taken care of by the market forces, but there has to be a balance. The paternal approach is also required.
Yes, Dr. Ravindran.
My name is K.T. Ravindran. I am the Dean of the RICS School of Built Environment. I have a comment on Mr. Kant's suggestion that dense, compact cities is where we should be moving to. And I think no one can quarrel with that idea because it works against sprawl. But at the same time, we seem to be continuously overlapping between high density and higher buildings. There is a misconception in thinking that only by going high, you can get higher density, or you can get a compact city. This is not true at all, because if you go higher, the more floor area you build, more amenities, more roads, more approaches, more parking, more everything you need. So the clue does not lie in going high. The clue lies in looking at higher densities depending on the kind of fitment of the kind of community that one is planning for. So this is unfortunately a continuous misconception which has been in the public domain, in planning circles in India in the last 5 years or so. And I think it's time, Madam, if you are sponsoring another book, and if there's a chapter on urban design, probably this idea of misconception about this high rise being equivalent to high density can be removed. Thank you.
Well, I promptly invite you to start writing that chapter for our next book. So thank you. Dinesh had something.
Plans in Indian cities, especially large cities like Delhi and Mumbai, they're very small. A very small proportion of trips are more than 15 kilometers. Almost 50% of trips are less than 5 kilometers. So what we call sprawl in the West is not sprawl here. Delhi is 40 cities in one city. A lot of people don't move out of that one city of the 40 cities. So, and this is partly because of the motorcycle. And the motorcycle has changed how people move. The motorcycle also fixes public transportation costs, because you cannot charge more from public transportation than the marginal cost of the motorcycle, running a motorcycle, which at present is about 80 paisa a kilometer. So this is, and therefore this system we are not like Los Angeles, where everyone goes from everywhere to everywhere. We don't go from everywhere to everywhere in our cities. So therefore, this whole understanding of the Asian city, or not only Indian, has to be a little more theory and data-based.
Thank you. Rakesh Ranjan.
Madam, I am Rakesh Ranjan. I am advisor in Planning Commission. I have two questions. One is that if we go by the HPEC report and the requirement that has been projected in the report of the huge finances which are required for the city, one would get the impression that the city governments will come, the state government will come and mob the Ministry of Urban Development, Ministry of Housing and Poverty Alleviation to get more fund. Our experience has been that these ministries are under serious strain how to spend the money, and every year they have been surrendering the money. So the basic question that comes in that we feel either the designs are very faulty of the scheme, or there is no appetite in the city, or the appetite is very less. So the question here is that how do we improve the appetite of requirement of more money? It is not simply a capacity issue. I think it is a long-term decision-making issue. The horizon of the decision-making in a city is 2 years or 3 years, which matches with the municipal commissioner's activism period. But nobody looks at the 10-year period that I have to take my city to this. So there doesn't seem to be that vision, and that can be institutionalized only by putting the urban planning as the core of the development. Now, my second point is regarding the monetization of the land. Now, we have been talking about this for last now 4 to 5 years. My question is, suppose, ma'am, we ask you this question. What is the 5 things that Planning Commission of India should do to promote this? What is the 5 things that Ministry of Urban Development should do to promote it? Because we have been saying that we want to do it. But every time when we look at this, we see that there is less of appetite in the ministry. Or there is within the government itself, when the Ministry of Urban Development goes and says, I want to sell a piece of land and want to make the high-rise building, the senior level functionary within the government said, but are you a real estate developer? I mean, why do you want to do this? So shouldn't you do it with the budget? So I just wanted to know that how do we handle this question?
Dr. Chetan Vaidya.
Thank you. As some of you know, I head the School of Planning and Architecture in Delhi. And one of the problems, all that what we have been talking about, the changes in the planning, changing in the project implementation, how do we bring these changes in the academic teaching of planning? I think that is one issue. And unfortunately, with all this interdisciplinary work, our schools of planning and architecture are in department-wise, and that interdisciplinary approach has still not taken place. That is one area we need to work about. How do we change our education system?
Thank you. Sunita.
Good morning. I'm Sunita Kakar, and I work with the World Bank in New Delhi. Ala, thank you so much for your ideas, which I found extremely stimulating. And the one I wanted to pick on was really that we establish regulations that make it mandatory to occupy a minimum amount of physical space in the city in order to have a formal access to the city. And this, to my mind, betrays this deeply embedded perception of cities as physical entities rather than as economic entities.